I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. On the Senate floor Monday, Senator Dick Durbin blasted the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. The June ruling gave states the license to ban abortion. According to a recent Pew Research poll, most U.S. adults disapprove of the Supreme Court overturning Roe. The Illinois Democrat says the High Court's ruling, quote, has unleashed a healthcare crisis in this country. Listen in as the Senate Majority Whip explains.
Madam President, I wonder if Americans think the cost of prescription drugs are too high. I wonder if Americans realize that the cost of prescription drugs are so high in this country that they're driving the cost of health insurance premiums up. Don't take my word for it. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Chicago told me that directly. Why are premiums going up? Prescription drug prices are going up. I wonder if the American people realize there are only two nations on earth that allow drug companies to advertise drugs on television. You know one of them, United States of America. The other, New Zealand. No other country allows that to take place. I wonder if the American people realize that the same exact American drugs that are sold here at the highest prices are sold at a deep discount in other countries. Canada, the reason American drugs cost less than they do in America is because the Canadian people won't tolerate the prices pharmaceutical companies charge people in this country. So they establish standards and cut the prices for the exact same drugs made, manufactured, and sold in the United States. They're not alone. Europe does the same thing, bringing down these prices. And so we decided that at least in one area, we were going to make an exception to this overpricing of prescription drugs, the Veterans Administration. We said it cost a lot to keep our promise to veterans who have served this country and need medical care afterwards. And so we are going to allow the Veterans Administration, we do under law, to negotiate with the drug companies to bring prices down. It works. They're brought down dramatically. For the longest time, many of us have thought that isn't enough because most of the drugs are being sold outside of the Veterans Administration and there's no negotiation. It's a take it or leave it. Medicare. The tens of millions of Americans who are covered by Medicare face the cost of drugs which are sky high. And so we decided on the Democratic side that we were going to listen to the people we represent who have told us over and over again that when it comes to the cost of living and expenses families face, many of these families were facing a choice of their money or their lives to buy drugs that doctors told them were essential for their survival. So we proposed that finally the pharmaceutical companies have to negotiate with the government when it comes to Medicare drug pricing. Now, you didn't hear that directly from the senator from Kentucky who just spoke. He talked about socialism in pricing drugs. Socialism? For the government to suggest we want to bargain for prices? These companies, incidentally, are not getting by hand to mouth. They're doing quite well, and they're making a lot of money. And they didn't do it on their own. I want to address that issue. This notion that if they were paid less for their drugs, it would stifle innovation. The pharmaceutical industry, Madam President, spends more money on advertising on television than they do on research. Why would they do that? So that some people watching the ad of a person skipping through a field of flowers will finally get to the point where they can spell Xarelto and go into a doctor's office and say, I want to skip through flowers, I want Xarelto. And you know what? Some doctors say, fine, and write the script. And that's why the cost of medicine and healthcare goes up. But the bottom line is this: these pharmaceutical companies, as good as they are, as many things as they find, they don't do it alone. You know what the number one supplier of research information is to the private sector pharmaceutical companies in America? The federal government, the National Institutes of Health. We spend tens of billions of dollars each year doing basic research, which is then used by the pharmaceutical company to develop their drugs. Is it too much to ask them to bargain a fair price for drugs sold to Medicare so that the taxpayers get a break and the pharmaceutical profits may go down just slightly? I don't think it's too much to ask. Well, we're going to have an interesting debate in the next few weeks because the Democrats think it's time that pharma be held responsible for dramatically overcharging Americans for pharmaceutical drugs that cost a fraction of its price in Canada and Europe. The senator from Kentucky obviously sees it another way. He thinks it's socialism. He calls it a free lunch. We want to give away a free lunch. It isn't a free lunch when you can't afford to fill your prescription the doctor gave you, and you wonder if you're jeopardizing your health or your life. Take the drug insulin. We're working on that too. Insulin wasn't discovered by Americans. It was discovered by Canadians back in the early part of the 20th century. And they decided, and what a gesture it was, that they were going to give away and surrender the patent on this discovery. Before then, it was not atypical that people died from diabetes. After insulin, they could survive. It was a life and death drug. And the researchers who discovered it said, this shouldn't be a profit maker. This should be something that's priced so that people can continue to live. Well, what's happened to insulin? Over the years, the pharmaceutical companies started doing their magic, and the cost of insulin for many people is dramatically higher than they can afford. Some people actually cut the amount of insulin which they're told to take because they can't afford it. We want to bring down the cost of this life-saving drug to $35 a month maximum for a premium for insulin. And I think that is a reasonable amount of money. So I believe that when it comes to the drug industry in America, it is a great sector of our economy. They found some wonderful things with the help of federal research. They're making profits, as I guess every private sector company is designed to do. But it's not unreasonable for us to ask. It is not socialistic for us to ask as American citizens that they negotiate fair prices for all Americans. They do it for veterans, they can do it for Medicare and others. And if the senator from McConnell is signaling we're in for a fight over this issue, all I have to say are three words: bring it on. Bring it on. The American people are sick and tired of the overpricing of these drugs. And I think it's time that we have this debate. And if the Republicans want to stay on the side of pharma and say the Democrats are wrong, let's take that to the American people in November. I think it's a viable issue. Madam President, a separate place in the record, I'd like to insert another statement.
Without objection.
Thank you. In the weeks since the Alito-Thomas Supreme Court majority erased the constitutional right to abortion, the right-wing disinformation machine is kicked into high gear. Again and again, we hear the same empty words of reassurance from the Republican side. They claim that overturning Roe simply handed the question of abortion back to the people's representatives, back to the states. Just that simple. This is false, and they know it. The reality is, overturning Roe has unleashed a health care crisis in this country. It's ripped a right to make essential health care decisions away from the people and their doctors and handed it to the politicians in individual states. As soon as Roe was overturned by the Alito Supreme Court, nearly a dozen states outlawed abortion. In Ohio, abortion access is so restricted that we've heard this horrible, bone-chilling story of a 10-year-old rape victim who was denied care in the state of Ohio. 10 years old, Madam President. At the age of 10, parents and grandparents are still worried about 10-year-old grandkids crossing the street. This 10-year-old victim had been raped. She was pregnant. The state's law in Ohio only permits abortions before fetal cardiac activity is detected, which is usually at 6 weeks of gestation. At the time this 10-year-old child sought care, she was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant. She missed the deadline. So the child was forced to flee her home state of Ohio and travel to Indiana, where she was given medical care. And from the moment this story made headlines, what was the response from Republican politicians and the conservative media? They said it was fake news. It's a hoax. They accused the doctor who treated the girl of just plain lying. They said that Democrats were making up these doomsday scenarios to scare the American people. And the Wall Street Journal, Madam President, even ran an editorial calling the story, quote, too good to confirm. But unthinkable and sickening as it may be, the story is true. So why did Republicans go to such great lengths to discredit it? Because they refused to admit the truth. When faced with a case that shows the extreme consequences of outlawing abortion, as the Supreme Court just did weeks ago, they dismissed the facts as a lie. Well, here's the truth. Republican anti-choice policies will force children who are still not old enough to cross the street on their own, to give birth. 10 years old. And Republicans are not content with simply banning all abortion. They want to prosecute the healthcare professionals who have to make the life and death decisions in the practice of medicine. Healthcare professionals like the one who treated this little girl from Ohio. Just last week, Indiana's Republican Attorney General declared he was going to investigate this doctor from Indiana who provided this abortion. Well, what were his grounds for investigating? He claimed that the doctor didn't properly report the abortion to state authorities, but even that isn't true. Records show the doctor followed the law exactly as it's written. How did we reach this point? It has not even been a month since the Dobbs decision, and Republican officials are already finding ways to intimidate doctors who are providing essential care to Americans and America's children. The radical right-wing majority on the Supreme Court has given these lawmakers a green light to enact the most unreasonable, outrageous abortion bans imaginable. And as cruel as these bans may be, they cannot change the reality that reproductive health care is health care. In some cases, an abortion can mean the difference between life and death. The moment politicians start meddling in life or death health decisions, the moment we turn over these life and death decisions to a legislator rather than to a doctor and a patient, we are headed down a dark, dangerous, and deadly road. Here's what's happening. Right now, there is a doctor in America today who's being forced to make an impossible decision. Do I risk jail time? Do I risk criminal charges by providing the care that I believe my patient needs? Or do I sit back and risk my patient's life and health from pregnancy complications? What a choice. Do you want to make that as an elected official? I'm not competent to make that choice. I'm a lawyer, liberal arts, didn't spend a day in medical school. When it comes to the people I care about, my family and others, I want medical professionals to make that decision, not run-of-the-mill politicians. Last week, the Texas Attorney General filed a lawsuit against President Biden's administration. What was the reason? Because the administration issued guidance making it clear that health care providers are legally protected when offering legally mandated life or health-saving services in emergency situations. Think about that. Texas would rather allow women to risk their health, even death, than allow them to seek emergency life-saving care. And yesterday, the New York Times, and I commend this article to everyone, reported that miscarriage patients in Texas are being turned away by doctors. These women are being denied care because, quote, doctors are worried the patients might have actually taken abortion pills that hadn't expelled the pregnancy, two situations that appear medically identical. One San Antonio-based OBGYN put it best when she said, and I quote, "The art of medicine is lost and actually has been replaced by fear." This, the world we have entered after the fall of Roe, and it is a wake-up call for every member of the Senate. Don't turn your eyes away from it. This is the reality of the Supreme Court decision. Our constitutional rights should not and cannot differ state by state. For 50 years, this was a fundamentally constitutional guaranteed freedom, and it needs to be protected again by federal law. I don't think this court's going to stop with overturning Roe. I commended to all my colleagues a speech made last Thursday by Senator Kaine of Virginia. Before he was in politics, he was a civil rights lawyer, and he's a good one. And he explained the 14th Amendment and what it means if we are to take the Alito court analysis and basis and reject the notion that the 14th Amendment defines our citizenship in so many different ways. Justice Clarence Thomas has indicated the far-right majority is coming next for the right to family birth control and contraception. Oh, that can't be true, Senator. They're not going to go after birth control pills. Watch them. They've already announced they're on their way. And marriage equality, and making our decisions about the future of our families. This Senate must act to protect marriage equality and all the fundamental human rights that are under threat by this radical Supreme Court. The question, though, when November comes around, will the American people care, or will they take a nap? Will they decide it's somebody else's problem? Well, I hope they don't, because these problems are really facing all of us as Americans, whether we like it or not. We'd rather not talk about this issue, but the Supreme Court gives us no choice. Now let's be sensible. These are medical decisions that should be made by medical professionals. Madam President, I ask that this last statement be placed at a separate part in the record.
Without objection.
2 weeks ago, the Center for Disease Control issued an alert. There was a listeria outbreak. It sent nearly 24 people in 10 states to the hospital. For those who may not know, listeria is the bacteria that causes us listeriosis. It's serious. It's a life-threatening illness. In most cases, the infection causes fever, sometimes confusion, loss of balance, but in some cases it can be deadly. Tragically, an expectant mother from Massachusetts who contracted it lost her baby, and another person in my home state of Illinois lost her life. Her name was Mary Billman. She was from Posodum, Illinois. It's a small downstate community, about 15 miles south of Champaign. In January, she went to Florida to visit her daughter. One day, she decided to grab an ice cream cone. Harmless, right? As it turned out, no. That ice cream was contaminated. Ice cream is the most likely source of this listeria outbreak. Mary Billman was 79 years old. The listeria that she faced took her life. This outbreak is one example of a long list of outbreaks in America which are becoming way too commonplace. The Food and Drug Administration is responsible for regulating 80% of our nation's food supply. Nearly all the foods we buy at the supermarket are supposed to be guaranteed as safe by the Food and Drug Administration. So when we pick up a box of cereal for the kids, a bag of lettuce, a jar of peanut butter, a pint of ice cream, we assume it's been inspected. We assume it's safe. Here's a problem. Too often that is not the case. The FDA is failing to uphold its most basic food safety responsibility, inspecting facilities. Over the past decade, the number of inspections it performed have fallen by nearly 60%. 60% decline in inspections in the last decade. And to add insult to injury, that decline happened after Congress passed the FDA Food Safety Modernization Act, a 2011 bill which I authored that instructed the FDA to increase the number of inspections. They did the opposite. If that weren't bad enough, in 2017, the HHS Inspector General concluded that even when the FDA did inspect facilities, the agency did not always take action when it uncovered significant inspection violations. We know that story. This summer, a bacteria known as Chronobacter contaminated infant formula, leading to nationwide shortages. The FDA was alerted to this problem, Madam President, 4 months before it took any action. 4 months. So even when the FDA performs an inspection and identifies a threat to public health, it doesn't take timely action. Not even when the problem can sicken and kill adults, children, and infants. That is hard to imagine. The FDA is adrift, and our most vulnerable people in America, children, mothers, and older Americans, are at risk. Last week, I introduced a bill that would transfer all of the FDA's food responsibilities to a new agency outside the FDA that we hope will actually do its job. We're calling it simply the Food Safety Administration. Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, my friend and a representative from the state of Connecticut, has introduced the companion bill in the House. Our bill represents a clean slate for food safety in America. It would create a new food safety administration that would be run by food safety experts who were focused on protecting the nation's food supply. Madam President, if I went into detail of the responsibilities of different federal agencies to inspect foods, you wouldn't believe it. If you have a cheese pizza, Food and Drug Administration. Put pepperoni on the pizza, now it's Department of Agriculture. It changes based on definitions that might have made sense sometime in the past, make no sense anymore. On behalf of the nearly 50 million Americans who contract a foodborne illness each year and tens of thousands who are hospitalized, it's time to stop talking about it and do something. The FDA failed my constituent, Mary Billman, along with 3,000 Americans like her who lose their lives every year to foodborne illness. Many of these deaths are preventable, but they'll keep happening if we don't fix our nation's defunct food safety system. We say America is the wealthiest nation in human history. We're blessed, we know, with one of the most abundant agriculture industries, and we're home to some of the best and brightest scientists in the world. So there is absolutely no excuse for allowing the FDA's food safety failures to persist. With our legislation, we can replace this broken system with one that will finally protect our families. Madam President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.